What's that card in the left? No, not that left. The other left. No. The one in the back, right next to your energy. Hey everybody, it's Spear here, and today we're going to go over the webcam meta. Like you guys probably know by now, the online Premier TO webcam tournaments have been going through starting as of last week and running through the entire month of September. This is good. These tournaments have the same pricing as Gen Con, but they have the additional fact that if you make top 8, you actually get invited into an invitational only tournament in mid-October, hosted specifically by Bandai. I don't know who the TO is going to be, but that's all we really know so far. So I think it'd be good to give you guys an idea of what the webcam meta is like, because it does vary quite a bit from what we would actually see if we were playing in paper or if we were playing on Untap. So because of all these things, I think it's really important to give as much insight as I can to what you're about to see and get you better prepared for the tournaments. Couple of reminders. First one, the Core TCG is hosting their own tournament this coming weekend. The emails should have went out, so be sure that if you signed up for the Premier tournaments to check your email to see if you would have gotten into these Core TCG tournaments, because you need to validate through email to be able to secure yourself a spot to get in. Also, we currently have a giveaway going on the channel. Thank everybody for getting me to 1K subs. If you want to know how you can participate, the info will be in the eye in the corner, or the video link will be in the description down below. Just do what the video says and you'll be qualified to get it. With that said, let's jump into the webcam meta. And I think the biggest thing we need to consider when we're talking about webcam meta is that this is using cards players own. Now, we have to consider the state of the world, right? Before this whole thing happened with the world and 2020 happened, it wouldn't be that crazy to say people are going to run the most competitive decks they have possible to every single event because of pricing, because of clout, whatnot. Because of the reality of the world, a lot of players never got around to updating their decks post set 9, right? We had the Las Vegas regional, and that was really the last big event since everything shut down. And because of that, odds are we're going to see an overrepresentation of the set 9 meta. That's the last time that a lot of players saw any value in updating their competitive gauntlet or their competitive or whatever competitive decks they have, because there were no events to go to beforehand, so why update the deck otherwise? So aside from very dedicated Dragonball players, odds are most people still have their competitive decks living somewhere in the set 9 meta. Like we saw with Top Cuts tournament, that means Invoker, that means Reboot Gohan. So that's something we have to consider too. It also means we probably have an underrepresentation of green, because a lot of green staples have been printed in Draft Box 5 forward, right? So we have Ribrianne, we have Dormant Potential, and odds are for most green decks, these are essential. These are staples that almost every green deck is going to want to include, especially since a lot of green decks hover around hand destruction. So because of that, these are really expensive cards. And they came out after the game had fallen into a lull because there's no more competitive events. These are things you have to consider. Now, granted, I'm not saying there won't be any green. You might end up facing some green. There are a lot of people out there who love the card game and kept on buying after everything that has happened in the world. But reality is there's not as many green players out there as one would be led to believe, no matter how strong green is and how much potential green has. So because we have to account for the fact that players have to own these cards, and sure, some players loan out cards to friends, that's totally fine, we account for that. The reality is there are going to be less players on these strategies simply due to the fact that the game hasn't been played at such a competitive nature since February. So when we look at what archetypes those leave us behind with, you know, we have a little bit of everything, but a lot of old mainstay. So when we're talking about aggro, Reboot Gohan. If my Top Cut tournament was anything to say for, I played 4 Gohans, and I know I didn't see all of them. And it makes sense, right? It's a low to the ground super aggro deck that if you get there, you get there. And it's not that expensive. You know, you got Earth Shattering Kamehamehas as I think the most expensive card in the deck, and maybe Celzino. Some decks run Celzino, but odds are I think most of the people I played against don't. Then of course there's Vegex. Once again, a really cheap deck to get into. Sure, some of the higher end pieces might be slightly expensive, but for the most part, you got a starter deck. You're like 80% of the way there. So again, another cheap, great deck to get in there. Bulma, it's not specifically Bulma, but from what I could tell from the previous tournament, Bulma was the face of vanilla aggro. So it's something to take into account for the fact that vanilla is, again, a strategy that has been around forever and it's been rejuvenated by a few new cards that have come in the last couple of sets. Well, now because of that, Bulma and, you know, by extension, any other deck playing vanillas is going to be there and is going to push. So generally you want to be ready for aggro, right? If you're not playing aggro yourself, make sure you have answers in the deck. I personally ran 4 topos because I think that was my best way. And even then, decks like Gohan can get around that, right? With Forced Breakthrough or something like that, where they could just say no to your topo. So you need to account for that. You need to be ready for that. If you're gonna play a topo, make sure you have some backup defense. And if you don't, then at least make sure you have board control. Do whatever you can to make sure you don't just die on turn 2. And if you are playing aggro, then you just gotta run hot, right? At the end of the day, if you're running hot, and very few things can beat that. Inversely to aggro strategies, we also have stall strategies. So here, we probably gonna see Sin Shenron and Invoker. Invoker, huge mainstay of set 9 meta, still very powerful, and explicitly because it did so well last tournament, you know some people just love jumping onto decks when they're hot and they're doing really well. So odds are you're probably going to see a number of Invoker players. Aggress them down, maybe tech in a way to get rid of their Vegeta, do whatever you can to really disrupt their play and put on as much pressure as you can early. With Sin Shenron, why do I believe Sin Shenron is that while yes, Sin Shenron is one of the newer archetypes, it's from the latest set, one thing that we have to account for is that the entire archetype is relatively cheap. I believe you have the 9-drop Sin Shenron that's like an SR, but the rest of the deck is a bunch of commons, uncommons, and the entire archetype can be constructed right there for not very expensive. And the SCR that the deck would most likely run is like the cheapest SCR in the game. All these things considered mean that it's a very viable strat. It topped last weekend, which gives players a lot of incentives to try and run the deck. It's a very popular deck, it's a very popular character. All these reasons, I think we could see some more Sin Shenron going into the next tournament. Then, to wrap it all together, there's the good stuff. So between aggro and stall, we have good stuff. Why do I have Surge Coup here? Surge Coup is still a super powerful deck. When we saw in Gen Con tournaments, we did see somebody top with the Surge Coup list. And mind you, it was like tricolor, is just to say Surge Coup still has the potential of being a fantastic yellow good stuff leader. With arrivals, with playing on your opponent's combat step, and while it might not be as great defensively as it used to be, I think it's very important to keep into account that in general, yellow good stuff is still a powerful strategy, and people have it from the previous formats. So whether they take that previous deck completely and just revamp it a little bit, or they just flat out bump that stuff all into Go tanks, odds are we're going to see a number of yellow good stuff and blue good stuff, because Blue Zamasu and Vegito, very popular archetypes. Zeno, God Seal, and Abuni, very busted. Everyone knows about those. And in general, when Draft Box 5 first came out, Abuni was generally a cheap pickup. For the most part, the decks aren't too crazy expensive as long as you forget about the Abunis. People like these strategies. Odds are, because of how popular these strategies were when set 10 first came out, they will follow through, and a decent amount of people probably still run them. I know I ran against a mono blue player. Granted, it was Soul Striker, but it's still in that same realm of the same type of strategy. With that said, there's no red. Red does not have a great place in the meta right now. Explicitly because it doesn't have a great way to close the game yet. I think this changes a ton when set 11 comes, but right now red can't close games. And in general, between Court Sky and then a lot of different things that a lot of the black decks and a lot of the mid-range decks are doing, red just isn't all that great positioned right now. So while as a splash color it's awesome, I don't think we're seeing red good stuff anytime soon, and I don't think we're seeing any like hard red archetypes really doing incredibly well in these tournaments. And then of course, lacking in green, like I said, a lot of green staples are locked into the last couple of sets. They're very expensive. So I do add an asterisk in saying that Dredge Coup could be in this good stuff list, but I don't think, as far as the representation of the meta I've been seeing, you're going to see that much green, so I wouldn't prep a ton for it. When we're talking about teching slots, maybe tech in one card for Invoker. Tech in a lot for aggro, because you're going to see aggro, I absolutely guarantee it. And then just try and hedge your mid-range matchups. And I think if you consider all those things, you probably have a successful recipe for doing well in this tournament. All right, well, that was pretty much my meta-analysis call. Between the good stuff, between the stall, and between the aggro, I think these are the biggest things we are going to see in the webcam metas. Not only this past weekend and this weekend with Chorus Tournament, but the remainder of the weekends leading up to October's Invitational. So what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below what you guys plan on taking or what you plan on seeing most often, because the more we get to understand this meta, the more and more everyone can get ready and understand what the game's going to be like moving into the next 4 or 5 weeks. Quick reminder, I stream every Tuesday to Thursday at 6 p.m. EST, so you want to catch that. Links will be down in the description down below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you thought it was bad, hey, thumbs down works too. And if you want to see more of my content, feel free to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Ciao.